try and turn on my computer. OK. OK, good. So did you all have lunch? OK, no? OK, did you have coffee? Because we're going to need some. So my name is Yunus, and I'm the creator of WishTag. I'm going to tell you more about it later. So I've been extreme programming since like 10 years. So moving from web development, creating stuff, to web security, breaking stuff, then back creating stuff, front end and back end mainly. And so WishTag was created like 5 years ago because I created that with my friend Lionel, who's not here today. And we created WishTag because I was looking for pleasure at work and freedom. So it was the only company I found which really made that possible for me. So what we do at WishTag, so we have a social shopping application. It's not what I'm going to talk about here today. But we do trainings from web development to extreme programming and security. We also do consulting and extreme programming coaching. And we do consulting sessions, a special thing we do. Like if you have any question or you have any things you want to solve with Angular or anything, you plan a session with us like an hour or two and try to solve that together. So today I'm going to talk about A/B testing, canary release, and white labeling with interchangeable components. So does A/B testing ring a bell? Do you know A/B testing? Can you raise your hands? OK, cool. So I'm going to skip that. Canary release, birds, no. OK, it's or progressive deployment, maybe. Something that talks more. And white labeling, is that? OK, good. And interchangeable components? Really? OK, good. So, OK. So this is a story which is not totally real because I had to change it because it actually happened in a bank. And banks are not very funny, so I tried to make it turn into something different. So it all starts with AB. So AB is our product owner. Okay. So she came up with an idea. She has ideas like all the time. So her idea was like, oh, I want an application to find conferences around. So, original. So OK, we can do that. So we created this with Angular. Yeah, it's pretty simple, let's say. Okay. Problem is, at the beginning, AB was quite happy. She was like, oh, OK, that fits my needs. So like clients seem to be happy too. But the problem is that we realized quite quickly that it was not the best user experience ever because you couldn't get the conference just in one click. So it was quite frustrating for users, some of them. So quite quickly, we used material chips to just grab the right conference there immediately. But then, so it was quite quick, but we couldn't release that because we were quite afraid. Do you know that feeling? Like, oh, I have the feature. It works, localhost 4200, but I can't release it. So we chickened out for two reasons. We were afraid that people wouldn't like this new approach. And the other problem was that, you know that feeling when you're afraid that a small change like this would break the whole web? Yeah. So AB said, because she has ideas, so she thought that maybe anyone should be able to release new features like one by one. Like we develop features, but then we want to release them separately. So we thought maybe we can teach her some Git spaghetti. Do you know Git spaghetti? Cherry pick, rebase, squash, stuff like that. And then she said that she wanted to do that progressively on the audience. So we thought that Git wouldn't help us with that. And then she wanted to be able to roll back if necessary. So we thought maybe we could teach her some Git revert, but it doesn't solve everything. And she wanted to do that from home, like in one click, so you can roll back quite quickly just from your smartphone or your setup. And we didn't want to do that. Because like, oh, this makes a lot of changes. But then I had this voice in my head from Kensbeck saying, embrace change, young man. It doesn't speak like that, but I thought it would be funny. So the team started thinking about things, and they were like, maybe we need A/B testing. I was like, but A/B is already testing the application. And then it was like, no, we need A/B testing on users. I didn't get that. Then someone said something about birds, I don't remember, and someone else said something about some kill switch. Well, I went back home, I went to sleep, and I started having nightmares. And the worst one was the kill switch, actually. So I couldn't even turn on the light to read stuff. So I waited the day after, and I started reading about A/B testing. How did they spell that? Okay, good. So A/B testing, I'm going to go quite quick on that. So it's basically you have 2 or more variants of some feature or application, and you just route part of your audience on the features you want, etc. And then you need the right metrics, business metrics mainly, to see which one behaves better and makes more profit in general. So you take the winner. And the idea is to make data-driven decisions. It's not about the feeling about what features sounds to be good. But now we're going to talk about canary release. So canary release, well, there are synonyms for that. Some people know it as progressive deployment, canary deployment, rollups, blah, blah, blah. And so the idea of canary release comes from, you know where? Coal mines. Like, so we used to do that. Like, you go into the mine with the canary, and if there was gas, then the canary would die. Then you would go out and grab another canary and try again. They stopped doing that. I think so. Well, anyway. So in the web, what happens is that it works a little bit like A/B testing, but then you start, like you have a new feature, then you route users to that feature, and you start first with like friends, fools, family, employees, and then anyway, you choose the right strategy you want. And you have monitoring. So you want to know if things work correctly or if there are bugs or anything. And if everything goes okay, so you just raise the audience on that feature. And if anything goes wrong, then you roll back. Okay? So what's a kill switch? So the kill switch is, suppose you have some chat application like this, like live support chat, okay? And things go really bad with the backend. You don't want the users to start writing messages, sending them, and it just goes bad. You want to fall back on something else, okay? So you need a kill switch, okay? And the kill switch will just fall back, okay, to some other feature, some other component, some message or something, or just an email form or anything, okay? So we do that with the kill switch. Okay. So then, okay, we were trying to think about how we could set up these kind of things. And then AB just got there again with an idea. And she said, you know, like next month there's Angular Connect, and you know, Pete, Josh, and those people, Bunny, they were like, oh, we'd love your application, but with Angular Connect branding. I was like, seriously? You know how it is. Well, so we thought about white labeling. So that's white labeling. It's just this. We do this a lot in banks in general. Like you create one app, but then you have different branding, and you sell that app to different banks or clients with different styles. But it's not about styles. It's also about features. It's also about the culture and things like that. Okay, and you might have different sets of features. Okay, so we started thinking about how we could manage to do that. So I came up with a weird idea I called interchangeable components. It's not micro apps. It's different. It's inspired from what we call interchangeable parts, like in the industry. You know, like you have two different, I don't know, fridges, and they come from different brands, but they have the same parts inside because they're built by different manufacturers, but they have some kind of standard, you know, like car wheels, for example, also are like this. So we need this for the web, like different components that have the same interface, so they behave the same way, they serve the same purpose. Here, for example, we had a component that serves one purpose, which is finding a conference, searching for one, okay? Searching for a topic. So they serve the same purpose, and they don't need custom fitting. You don't want to mess around with these components and be like, oh, if I'm in this situation, I'm going to use that component that way, blah, 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 you know. And the only way of doing that is that you have two or more different implementations that have the same interface, which is the same signature, and the signature of a component is not only, but mainly, its inputs and outputs, okay? I'm mainly talking about presentational components here, okay? Like low-level ones. So, okay, let's see some code about that. So it all starts with a classic TypeScript enumeration, okay? I love string enumerations. They're easier to serialize and things like that. And suppose you have some simple thing like this, like a configuration service, and this private method where you grab your configuration. So our app config is maybe some global variable that you injected in your app, or maybe you can use some API and grab that configuration later. Anyway, do however you want. And in the configuration, I have this string, this enumeration, which is the conference search display mode, okay? With a value that can be chips or form or links, like the different implementations we have. Then we have a map, all right? So we have a map that will map every enumeration to a component class, okay? Then we have a simple method that grabs the component, the right component class depending on the configuration. Is that fine? We could split that a little bit more into different services and unit test them separately or together. It's another subject. Anyway. So problem is, now you have a component. How do you inject that component in your view? Nobody was here this morning. OK, gonna tell that to the guys. So the thing is that you usually use view container ref, you know, and you inject the component dynamically, but you have to clean up this thing later. And if you pass inputs, if you just set the properties, it's not very good, but because it does not trigger ng on changes, and you have a lot of trouble. So in Angular, you probably met ng component outlets, which is like native in Angular. Do you know that directive? It's a structural directive that will allow you, it will inject that component dynamically in the view. It will create it and destroy it afterwards. OK? Is that fine? So if the configuration changes, if the component class changes, it's going to get replaced dynamically. So problem is, this is cool. OK, it works. Problem is, we have some container components and presentational components at the bottom. And they have to communicate, mainly through inputs and outputs. OK? Everyone familiar with that? So here, for example, my input is the category of topics I want to display in the list of links. And when the user chooses a topic, it triggers an event, topic change event, to the parent. OK? Problem is, it doesn't work. There's an issue for that. ng component outlet doesn't implement inputs and outputs for the moment. So it might change. I don't know if it's going to change before IV or not. Anyway, we'll see. But there's some cool guy who created ng dynamic component. And it's not me. It's the real cool guy. Anyway, so ng dynamic component, what it does is that it just adds inputs and outputs to ng component outlet. Is that cool? So you can pass inputs. It's different syntax because it's one input that contains all inputs, so it's an object. And you can grab outputs, too. But be careful. You might have noticed I'm using an arrow function there. That's for not to lose this binding of the object. If you use a method, it won't work. OK? Is that cool? So now the next step is that we're going to create an interface to describe this kind of components, OK? Conference search components. So this is the signature of the component. So there's the input, category string, and the output. And here you might be wondering why it's an observable and not an event emitter. Because Angular doesn't really care about if it's an observable or an event emitter. It's waiting for an observable. It's waiting for something to subscribe to. Okay? And actually, you can create outputs which are not event emitters. So that's why it's more generic. So it works. And it gives the signature. It tells us, OK, how these kind of components work. And we can use that everywhere, like in our map. OK? So if we use a component that doesn't have these inputs and outputs, then we'll have build time issues. So we ended up with something like this. So we gave an administration interface allowing AB or anyone else to control the audience percentage and deploy these components progressively. Actually, the components are in the bundle, OK? But we control which one we use using like the slider like that. We could use other ways. OK? We'll see that later, the demo. So that's how we felt. Yay. But not for long, because then we realized that when you have a concept and you're very happy and you start overusing it, okay? So that's what we did, and we ended up with some active components, which are the ones that are used actively by the users, and the unused ones, those that are in the map, but never injected, because the configuration didn't load them. So you end up with some active components there and lots of unused ones, which are still in the bundle. So we have a big bundle there. So how do we handle that? What do we need? We need lazy loading. But problem is, without Ivy, lazy loading is highly coupled to the routing. Okay? So there are two solutions. We go in deeper with the Angular 6 and 7 and see how it works, or we can wait for Ivy. Okay? For those who were at the talk this morning from Alex and Jason about Ivy. And if you missed it, you should definitely watch it, because that's the future, and the things I'm going to show you here are going to be, like, in the future compatible, or I try to make them compatible with Ivy, so it's going to be the smooth way to go there, okay? If you didn't watch the conferences, you can watch them on YouTube later. Not now, please, okay? So we came up with the idea of implementing a thing that we called reactive component loader. Okay? If you don't like the name, tweet me, because I'm really looking forward to change it, but anyway. So why is it called like that? It's reactive because we're going to be using observables, and we're going to load these components lazily as late as possible. Or not, depending on what we want. Okay? So first, it starts with describing all the modules, okay? Because we're going to put every component in a different module, because we cannot load components separately. We have to load modules for the moment, okay? And you don't want to put all the implementations in the same module, because you would end up with the same problem, because you load the whole module. So I'm going to zoom in, and this is how it looks. It might remind you of something, load children, okay? It looks a lot like a router. Actually, it's trying to hack the router low level. And it's actually creating a route there with it's linking the module ID we're going to use later with the load children. And we do this because otherwise the Angular build wouldn't build the daisy loaded modules, okay? So you see, so remember this. We have a module ID that will link to some module we load lazily. And then you have a reactive component loader service that allows you to load that component dynamically. You note that it's an observable there, okay? So we give it what I call a location. So a location is the module ID, is where the module is. And the selector, well, it's the component selector, okay? And you end up with a component recipe, okay? So the component recipe is not just the component type, it's also the ng module factory, okay? We need the ng module factory, otherwise the component wouldn't be found, okay? So ng component outlet can grab it, we can pass it as an input, it's going to use it. Now, it's still a little bit like tricky here, so we thought maybe we could make it a little bit more human readable. So why not just use the component location, okay? And we give that component location to a component called lazy. We give it the location, we give it the inputs, and we give it the outputs, and it's going to do all the magic. It's going to lazy load the module and grab the component and inject it. Okay? There's also a directive version of that. You get the point? This is the main thing to remember. So the thing is, the cool thing is that imagine if you have this lazy thing in ng-for or in an ng-if, while the ng-if is false, the component wouldn't load. And when it goes through, beam, you're going to load the right component. Okay? Lazy loading, reactive. So that was quite magic, and AB was happy. So, but then we had other things to see. So first, you can, I'm going to ask you to grab your phones and computers if you want to participate. And there will be a demo, not right now, but just grab the links, and we'll start the demo later. I'm going to show you something. So depending on your first name, you choose the version you want. You're going to see that later, why I'm splitting right now. Okay? And if you don't remember your name, it should be written on your badge. And if you don't have your badge, you can open both windows. OK. So the links are at the bottom. Can you read them? Can you see them at the back? Is it good? Cool. So then problem is, the whole logic is not in components. We have the behavior, and the behavior is mostly in services. So you might want to A/B test or canary release services. And we had this example, and so we had the buy button that would just follow some link and go to the right conference tickets URL. But then AB had a new idea. So AB thought, maybe we could just, like when you click the buy button, maybe we could add this product, this conference, to the cart. Okay? So different behavior there. And we want to deploy this. So we thought maybe we can apply the same interchangeable components concept to interchangeable services. Okay? So the idea is, OK, we have an interface for the service, a product behavior, and we have an implementation, like product behavior cart, which is the new one, OK, buy product, blah, blah, blah. And I want to use it. I can use it from the template, from my component. So I grab the product behavior, OK, this service. I inject the service, and I use it at the click button. OK? So if I have different implementations, I could switch at that moment, and I don't have to replace my components logic. Problem is, you can't swap services dynamically. Once the service is created, it's the same for the whole life of the component. And so we implemented, well, here for this example, a product behavior resolver, which is something that will grab the right service. So it's basically the same concept as for components. It's a map that maps every enumeration to the service class. OK? So then we grab the right class, the behavior class. OK? And problem is, we have to create an instance, and you definitely don't want to create it manually. You want to use dependency injection. Okay? So let's use the injector. Okay? So we use the injector, we give it the class, and it's going to create the instance, and then we'll get always the same instance. Okay?
But wait, don't you need to configure the injector beforehand?
No. That's the cool thing. You don't even have to configure that. The service just appears at that moment. Good point. And then the problem is you end up with the same problem as for components. We have all the implementations there. So same solution. We need to lazy load services. How? Well, this is tricky. This line contains 5 ECMAScript and TypeScript concepts, and Webpack concepts. We're using dynamic imports. So ES dynamic imports will grab the module dynamically. But with the CLI, actually, this will be converted to Webpack require. And Webpack will analyze the dynamic string we have there, see? And it will load the right service, which is the right class, which is the right module, TypeScript module, which has been compiled. And we can grab the class in the module. I just gave them the same name, so I don't have to create another map here to grab the right class. Okay? And guess what? You can use the injector. You give it the class, because the class contains all the metadata which is needed to inject services. And this works. So the service will be lazy loaded. Okay? So we're not using use factory or anything. We do it manually here. So, and the cool thing is that I love observables. So I don't want to use promises here. So I swap this, and I turn it into an observable using the defer function. OK? Just make it more reactive. OK. Demo is going to wake up everyone. OK. So the links. Everybody has the links? Can you raise your hands for those who got them? OK. OK, good. Thanks. So this is the interface. And you should have something ugly like that. Okay? So I'm going to start with deploying the new, I'm going to create a new rule, configuration rule, and I'm going to create an audience percentage condition. So depending on my audience, I'm going to switch the changes, switch components. And look at this here, at the network traffic here. Okay? And I'm going to use the new lists component here and the new chips search component here. And I'm going to start deploying this. Did it change? If it changes, can you raise your hands? And if it doesn't work, you can pretend like it works and you just raise your hands. Okay, 30%. Oh. Oh. Okay. And you see, the module was lazy loaded. And now, if you don't like it, I'm going to roll back. Good? So this works for A/B testing, but it also works for canary release. So you can release some component progressively, add some analytics on that component when it's loaded, okay? And you analyze that on your favorite tools for analytics. And now, I'm going to remove that, and let's try white labeling. So some of you must be on wishstack.io, and some others are on Firebase, okay? It's the same app, but I'm going to add new rules here. I'm going to put them on top. Oh, didn't work. The funny thing is that I had to implement drag and drop like 1 week before the CDK drag and drop. Just felt very fun. I thought it was a joke. Anyway, so here I'm making a new condition on the domain. It's going to be conference wishstack.io, and I'm going to give you 2 different configurations, because for the Firebase one is the Angular Connect version, so I'm going to put that. And they wanted a table, they said, and they wanted chips. Okay? Who's on this version? Okay. And now, for the other one, we just want some ugly stuff like that. Okay, because they didn't pay as much as the others. Okay. So now this was about white labeling. Are there any people on Android here? Okay. So someone told me just before that people on Android were more nerdy than iOS guys, and they love dark themes. Okay, I'm going to do that. So let's create a new rule here. And the condition is the device, it's Android. And let's turn it dark and add Wishstack logo. And maybe the Angular Connect 2018 logo. Do you like it? You don't? Let's swipe it back. Like it? Okay. Okay. And now, okay. But now iOS guys are jealous, aren't they? Okay, so let's turn it iOS. Oh, sorry. Okay. It's good? Or, okay, you know what? Android guys, I'm going to put something else here. Let's change the color. How ugly is it? Good. Perfect. Okay, anyway, why don't we just keep in touch? I'm going to share the links so you don't have to copy-paste them. And I'm going to disable this ugly thing here, maybe. OK. Is that cool? You got the links? Thank you. And just one last thing I think. OK. So I'm going to just explain quite quickly how it works. There's no magic there. There's no deep learning or anything. It's just A/B. Through the administration interface, we just create a configuration like this. We call it a rule. So a rule contains a condition, a position, and the configuration. OK? And then we put that on Cloud Firestore, Firebase, and it's synchronized like on all the devices on Angular. So we just watch that configuration and the rules, and we apply the rules. OK, this condition is good. This doesn't concern me. And it's an observable, so it keeps changing dynamically. Okay? So you don't have to do that because there are some tools for that. It's quite new for the front end, but it's coming more and more. And this is exactly the code that you have in the demo for that. Yeah.
How are you measuring conversion?
I didn't do it here, but then you can add analytics. You can do as you want. So yeah, exactly. So you just put it, like, for example, you could put that in on init, and you can trigger an event on Angular Analytics, and you grab the info. And so this is exactly how it works. So I'm using the async pipe, so the observable changes and the component will change. So the key takeaways, I'm going to accelerate a little bit. So the key takeaway is that inputs and outputs are the signature of interchangeable components. Lazy loading components is possible without Ivy using the Wishstack Reactive Component Loader. It's the library we released last week or this week. And services can be lazy loaded too using dynamic import. So what's coming next, what you might need is what I've had to develop here is a custom feature toggle management. That's how we call it. And you might need tools for that. And there's a market and there are products around for that. Some are open source, some are more expensive, and some are free. And it's not a maybe. This is going to be easier with Ivy, okay? And one last thing, and I think this is the future. I believe in interchangeable web components. I'm not talking about micro apps. I'm talking about interchangeable components. So there will be small components that can replace each other having the same signature. And it's web components because I believe in a world of peace and harmony where we could have all the frameworks and libraries in the same app. And anyway, I've shared some resources on the slide. I'm going to release that on Twitter. And I put some links on the different tools you can find. So from the open source one to Launch Darkly, which is really awesome. You should try. And sorry, that's time. And oh, OK, yeah, I didn't have lunch yet. And should go. So told you about that. And one last thing, if you visit our website, we share resources and guides like for Angular, Node, Python, and things like that, security. So go there. Some of it is in French, some things are in English. We have a blog you can check. And if you need anything, you can get in touch with us whenever you want, okay, through the website. Okay, well, thank you. And special thanks for all the people here and for all of you to be here. And for Shai, my speaker buddy here, and helped me a lot. So anyway, thank you very much.